the Texas Congressman Ron Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. I was told this was a special weekend and not too many would show up. Thank you for coming. I do want to introduce my family members here. My wife, Carol, please stand. And two granddaughters, Lisa and Linda. But it is great to see such a nice, enthusiastic crowd. You know, I give speeches on occasion, you know, in Washington, but I don't get any applause at all. And, you know, I'm very sympathetic to the younger people, those under 30. They seem to understand what liberty is all about so much better than some of those individuals that have been in Washington way too long, and they don't have the vaguest idea what liberty is all about. But to tell you what, I get encouraged a whole lot when I visit with the young people, the college students, because I know that the future looks bright when I meet with you. So I am enthusiastic. I hope I can encourage you because the stakes are high. The stakes are very high on what's happening, and I think that's what's happening. The people are coming to realize this. But liberty is my real issue. I do talk about economics. I talk about balanced budgets. I talk about foreign policy and the Federal Reserve and a few other things. But really, the issue is liberty. I believe our country had been the greatest and the most prosperous because we had a better understanding about liberty than any other country. We didn't have a perfect constitution, but it's very imperfect now, not because it became more imperfect, but because the people who were supposed to be following it became less perfect, and they totally ignore it now. So we need a new generation that cares about the rule of law and the Constitution. But I think of liberty as being very simply self-ownership. Who owns you? Who owns your life? Who has the responsibility for you? I come from a natural rights viewpoint, which is similar to what Jefferson talked about, natural rights, God-given rights, that our lives and our liberties come outside of government. Government was not created there to allow us to have liberty. If we're going to have government, which should be limited, it should be precisely to protect those liberties that are rightfully our own. But certain things come from this understanding of self-ownership. Of course, it means that it's your body, and people shouldn't tell you what to do with your body. It should tell you what you could do with your liberty. You should use your liberty, from my viewpoint and from my advice, is use it in a productive manner. I see liberty as the release of creative energy, and the purpose is to work for excellence and virtue, believing that once you deliver that responsibility to government, all they do is undermine liberty, and it ruins the efforts to be productive and to improve oneself. But if when one is convinced that we have this responsibility, it means two things. One, that you deserve to keep the fruits of your labor, which means there shouldn't be an income tax. Now that part is easily understood. The second half of it is not quite as easily accepted by some. But that is that if you have your right to your life and your liberty and to your property, you also have to assume the responsibility for any bad choices you make, and you can't go to your neighbor or to your government to bail yourselves out. It's been pretty well accepted in this country that these principles mean that you have a right to deal with your spiritual life any way you see fit. You can ignore it and not pay any attention to it, or you can practice your spiritual life any way you want as long as you don't hurt other people. But you're also allowed to pursue your intellectual life any way you see fit. We don't hopefully never get to that point. We shouldn't be in the business of book burning and saying that you can't study this, you can't study that. It should be you that makes the decision. And for the general, in a general sense, the American people have accepted this notion fairly well. Far from perfect, but fairly well. But where I think we have fallen down, and this is across the political spectrum, is this idea that it's your own body. That means if your spiritual life, which is a serious responsibility, and your intellectual life is a serious responsibility, why is it that if we assume that you can have free decisions there, why shouldn't you have free decisions on what you eat, drink, smoke, and put into your own body? Spiritually, we could argue that if you make a mistake, you have to deal with that in maybe another life. Intellectually, if you make mistakes, you have to deal with that yourselves. But if you make mistakes on making decisions about what you do with your own body, you can suffer the consequences. But if you once embark on this notion, as our country has now for hundreds, not 100 years essentially, that we have reneged on this and assume that the government will protect us from ourselves, a very dangerous notion. If the government assumes that its responsibility is to protect you from yourself, it has to deal with every habit you engage in, and it is impossible to do that and still have a free society. The free society is a wonderful thing because I see it as opening up the opportunities for creativity. But if we accept this notion that the government should tell us how to run our lives, the most important impractical result of this is that it destroys the productivity of all of us. It means that we will be poorer. If you have this idea that we should all be free and prosperous and do what we want on our own and be responsible for ourselves, we will be prosperous. The evidence is overwhelming throughout history that the freer a society, the more prosperous is the society. And that is what our goal ought to be. Now, there are many who challenge these notions, all the way from the extreme communist, socialist viewpoint to the extreme welfarists who believe that the government has to regulate the economy for the benefit of one group over another. But it does create the greatest prosperity, but one of the hardest parts for people to accept is if you have a free and prosperous society where you can use your own incentives to advance yourself, guess what? You don't have an equal society. And that is sometimes hard for people to understand. But if the results are that you have the most prosperity, you have the largest middle class, you have the best distribution of wealth, by far it is the best system to argue for and to work for. If it's government's job to make everybody equal, they're capable of doing it. Right now, they're working very hard on equality. But guess what? We're working on equality of poverty. That's what we're working on, unfortunately. Now, the free market Austrian School of Economics teaches that one thing, that government intervention doesn't work. It doesn't even come close to achieving what it pretends to achieve. But there's one other basic principle when it comes to monetary policy. Any society that embarks on the destruction of their currency, that is, by inflating the currency, increasing the money supply without anything behind the currency itself, and devaluing the currency, there's essentially always a transfer of wealth from the middle class class from the poor to the wealthy. And just think of this today. What's the main complaint? There's a large segment who are hurting, and there's a small segment is getting very, very wealthy. Now, I see this as very, very important and also a little risky in how we deal with this, because there are, in a free society, I said it was unequal, and there will be some rich and some poorer. But if a person is rich because they have been successful and because they have been voted to be rich by the consumer. See, the only democracy, of course, is a risky adventure. Pure democracy undermines the minority, and we don't want pure democracy. But in the economy, democracy really prevails, because every single person that spends every dollar are voting on the product. And that means if we could have a society where nobody got special privileges, where nobody got benefits, nobody got the edge by government force and government contracts, and then somebody is capable because they're bright and they'll work hard and produce a product that we, the consumer, likes, that individual, if he becomes wealthy, we have voted him his wealth. We have voted him the wealth because we like his product. But if an individual becomes wealthy because they have an inside track to easy money and easy credit, and also when they gamble with this money in the derivatives market and they go broke, and then they go crying to the government and say, look, we're broke. If you don't bail us out, there's going to be a depression. Give us more money. If that happens, if they got rich the wrong way and then they get bailed out the wrong way, they deserve a lot of criticism. Unfortunately, we have a lot of that's been going on for a long time. There's been everything from subsidies to special privileges and special contracts. And of course, we have this whole idea about how we spend our military money. That has, enriched many. Buying weapons we don't need, enriching the military-industrial complex. But that is complicated by people being talked into for patriotic reasons, that you can't resist any military spending, and that you have to endlessly fight wars if you're not, and if not, you're not patriotic. So in order to attack that, we also have to understand foreign policy. In the foreign policy of a free society, and a society that protects your individual rights, a free society under those conditions says, we as a country have a right to defend us if we're under attack, but we have no moral authority to force ourselves on other people, and we have no moral authority have no moral authority to accept this notion of preemptive war. They make it sound fancy. They make it sound like we have preemptive war because they're going to attack us someday, and someday they might get a weapon and they might come and get us, so we have to go and get them. That just is open-ended. It's also called aggression. We are drifting in that direction, and the world doesn't like it. We don't win friends around the world. What we do is we waste our money, we become more endangered, and we develop more enemies. So we have to address the subject, and your generation will have to do it because this system won't work. I have argued for many years about a non-interventionist foreign policy, and I've always been convinced I will win this argument. We will win this argument. Our side will win. I wish they would win just by being convinced on a moral basis and on a constitutional basis and on just practical reasons that we shouldn't be doing this, but we will win the argument about getting our troops home. Not for those reasons as much as we're going broke and we can't afford it anymore. The sooner we bring all our troops home, the better it will be for our economy. And this is just not bringing them home from the wars. We bring them home from the leftovers from the old wars. Why are we in Japan? come home from Japan, come home from Korea, come home from Germany. There's no reason for us to be subsidizing them.